Okay, so now that we've got our first working app, I'm going to show us how to initialize a GitHub account, set it up, and then push to GitHub. Um, and then ultimately, what we'll want to do is we're going to deploy this app onto the internet using Heroku. So a lot of words that you may have never heard of before, but we're going to first set up GitHub. Once we've set up GitHub, then we'll set up Heroku. So first thing we'll do is we'll go to github.com and we'll sign up for an account. And I'm just going to actually walk through this with you so that you've got an idea of how to do this. So I'm going to pick my username, test lamb. Someone's already used that. Let's go test 4400. Oh, test 4400. Okay, so we're going to call this test 4400. I'm going to use, let's see, that's already used. I'm going to use my UNT email for this test and a password. So I'm going to create an account, and you can go ahead and follow along with me. I'm going to choose my plan. I'm going to do unlimited repositories for free. I'm not going to choose any of these. And I'm going to skip this step. And I am going to start a project. Okay, so now that I've signed up for an account and I have a password, I probably have to verify my account. So we'll skip that in the video. Okay, so I've verified my account. The next thing I have to do is set up GitHub. And I will post this, a link to this in the tutorial notes. But the first thing we're going to do is we're going to download and install the latest version of Git. I've already got it installed, but you'll choose whatever your operating system, and you'll just download it. It should just walk you through and it should just download an executable file, and it should walk you through the installation process like any other piece of software. So I'm not going to bore you with that. But you'll download Git, so that's the first step. The second step is to set your Git username in Git. So we'll click that, and let's go into our app. So I'm in survey-4400. If you're not in survey-4400, get in the folder for your app on the command line. And we're just going to follow this tutorial. So this is setting your Git username for every repository on your computer. So I'm going to have to change this, you're going to want to do this, the global. I'm going to do a single repository because this is just again, I just am creating a test user. So I will do git config user.name, and I think, what was my username? I don't even remember. It was test 4400. So you would type in git config -- global username, and then you type in your username. And then we want to confirm that we've set our Git username correctly, so we'll do git config user.name. And it says test 4400. So make sure you're doing that and you're confirming that you've set your username correctly. Okay, so we want to set your commit email address in Git, which is the third step. And again, you're going to want to use the global settings. So you want to set this for all of the repositories on your computer. I'm just going to do it for this single one. So I'm going to do git config user.email, and I'm going to put my email, which was chris.lamb@urt.edu, and we're going to confirm, and I'm confirming that it did indeed work. Okay, so that's the first 3 steps. So now that we've set up Git, our next steps are authenticating with GitHub from Git. So when you connect to a GitHub repository from Git, you'll need to authenticate. Great. So let's do this. Let's connect our application that's on our local machine with GitHub online. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do a command called git initialize. It's git init for shorthand. Okay, so git init, git space init. The next thing we'll do is we'll go and you'll create your first repository. So you go to github.com, you'll log in, you'll create your first repository, and I'm going to call this repository survey-4400. You want this to match the name of the folder that you've just created. Now you want to create this repository, and you want to make sure this checkbox is not checked. So then we'll create repository. Great. Then we're going to just follow, a lot of this is just following the documentation. GitHub documentation is actually quite good. So we've already git init. We will I'm going to skip the README for now, and I'm just going to git commit -m, and I'm going to type in initial commit. You should have watched the setting up your GitHub account video, but if you haven't, this step, git commit, oh, you know what we forgot to do? There are untracked files, so we need to do git add, git commit. This commit allows us to add some documentation about what we're actually committing. Initial commit. So we'll do git add space period, git commit -m, initial commit. Let's go ahead and do our first push. Git push -u origin master. And what you should see is your computer thinking a little bit, but ultimately it should create a new master branch. And so when you refresh your repository, you'll see all of your files are now on this online repository in GitHub, and they're linked with that note that you put in your commit. We put initial commit. So we're good to go. We're all set up with GitHub. So the next thing we need to do is we need to sign up for Heroku and set up Heroku. So that's a multi-step process. The first process is to just go to Heroku.com and go to sign up for free and go ahead and sign up. I'm not going to sign up with you because I already have an account. You can pause the video if you need to sign up for your account. So what we're going to do now is the second thing we'll do, and I'll link all of these things to the tutorial notes. So step 2 really is downloading and installing Heroku CLI, which stands for Command Line Interface. If you're on a Mac, you can, and you've installed Homebrew, which you should have already done, you could just type this into the command line, brew install Heroku, or you could download the installer, which is pretty easy. It's a small file. If you're on Windows, you can just download the installer and run the exe file. It's an executable file. And that should install the Heroku command line interface. So those are the first 2 steps, fairly easy. Okay, so before we deploy to Heroku, there's one last thing we have to do, and that's in our Gemfile. So if we go, make sure you're in your app in Sublime, and go to the Gemfile, which is near the bottom. Should be near the bottom. What we're going to do is we're going to change out our database gems. So Heroku uses Postgres, PG, and the default for a Rails app is SQLite. So it's just two different databases. It doesn't matter if you don't know what either of those do. You just have to know that one is for your local environment and one is for your production environment. So I'm going to move this gem SQLite into our development environment. So just copy and paste the SQLite gem into the development environment. Then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually create a new group called production. So we're going to do group production, we're going to do something for our production group, and we're going to install two gems. One is called PG for Postgres, and one is called Rails 12 factor. Okay, so these are two gems that will allow us to transfer our database structure from Rails into Heroku properly. So now that we've made that change on our Gemfile, what we're going to do is we're going to go back into our command line and we're going to bundle install. So that should change, that should make those changes for us. But since we made changes to our Gemfile, we also have to push up those changes to Git. So let's do that again. So we'll do git add space period git commit -m. So I'm going to call this installed post PG gem for Heroku. And then I'm going to do a git push. Okay, so now that we've set up our databases properly in our Gemfile, what we want to do is create a new Heroku app and then push our app to Heroku. So what we'll do is we'll just follow the documentation. We'll do Heroku create, and that creates a new app. We'll do git remote -v. That connects our GitHub to our Heroku, and then we'll push to Heroku. So it's git push Heroku master. So what we're doing now is we're actually building the app from all of the files in GitHub and transferring them over to Heroku. So this might take 30 seconds to a minute. And basically it's installing all of the gem files that are necessary for the app to run, installing all of the database information and all of the source files. And so this will take a second, but once this is done, it'll be deployed on Heroku, and there'll just be one more step to make it work. Usually when we get to the compressing stage, that's a good sign, especially when we get to the launching phase. So that worked. So what we want to do is we want to do the command Heroku open, and that will open the new app in your browser. So we're sorry, but something went wrong. That's okay. We're not too worried about that. One thing we have to do is we have to actually run a database migration in Heroku. So instead of Rails, instead of RakeDB migrate, we're going to do Heroku run. So that's our command to do something in Heroku to the database. Then we're going to do RakeDB migrate. So Heroku run RakeDB migrate. And so that's migrating all of our database migrations that we have in our Rails app into the Postgres database. So you'll see a bunch of tables created. That's a good thing. That means it's working. So now if we refresh, our app should work. And it seems to be working, and we can select our responses, and that works. We can test it out. Everything seems to be working. So we're now deployed on the internet. We're not just running on our local server. So the last thing we can do is we could change the URL. So Heroku will give you it'll give you a default URL. Boiling Shelf 25875 was the URL that they gave me. You can actually rename that if you'd like. So I believe we can follow this command. So if we do Heroku apps rename, and then you can rename this app to something more meaningful. So I'm going to rename it to lamb-survey. See if that works. So let's see if we can go to lamb-survey.herokuapp.com. And we've renamed our URL. So this is the URL that you'll provide and turn into me for the homework. Okay, so that's it. Just for future reference, if you were to make any changes or additions to the app, you would have to push your changes to GitHub. So that's git add, git commit, git push, and then you would have to push to Heroku again, git push Heroku master. So you'll get used to those commands. Those will become second nature to you. But that's it. We've deployed our first app. We'll see you next time.